Investigators have determined Gene Hackman's wife Betsy died of Hantavirus.
It's a disease spread by rodents that attacks the lungs.
And also, two new reports show by 2050, more than half of adults and a third of children will be obese. We have a lot to talk about today. UW Health Dr. Jeff Pothoff is here with us.
Hi, Dr. Pothoff.
Hi,
guys. How are you?
Good. So let's talk first about this Hantavirus.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to know the answer of what happened to Betsy Arakawa, but it's not something we hear about very much here in the Midwest.
No, it's actually fairly rare across the United States, particularly in Wisconsin. No one needs to worry about picking up Hantavirus. We've had 5 cases since 1993. The last one was in 2017. But down in the Four Corners region, so New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado, this is a thing. It's a virus. It's carried by rodents, particularly the deer mouse, the white-footed mouse, and you need to come in contact with either the mouse's secretions, maybe their feces, breathe that in. And the tricky thing about Hantavirus is it'll start presenting like almost any other illness like flu. You got a fever, you don't feel well, nausea, vomiting, maybe some belly pain. But specifically to Hantavirus, it starts making the very small blood vessels in your lungs leaky, and it starts to fill your lungs up with fluid, which then often requires either support from a ventilator or sometimes even cardiopulmonary bypass to pull through. Mortality rates are pretty high. 20 to 30% of people who get that fluid in their lungs will eventually pass away.
And so with the way the symptoms present, you might not necessarily even know anything's out of the ordinary.
Right, 2 things that make this hard. 1, it presents just like anything else. 2, it's rare. So doctors aren't like, oh my God, this is Hantavirus. They really have to think about that exposure history. So are you in doing things either recreationally that puts you in contact with mice, or more often where they catch this is homes that are infested with mice. That would be a tip-off that maybe Hantavirus could be at play.
And then how do you handle that if there are mice droppings in your garage, for example?
I think you call the Orkin man. I'm not sure.
And don't
don't
deal with it.
Don't be playing with
Don't
dead
touch
mice
it
yourself.
or inhale it or anything. Is there any treatment for it?
Just supportive. So the things we would do to support kind of like acute respiratory distress syndrome, but there's not like a medicine or something that you can do to treat Hantavirus.
It's such a mystery because she was young. She was 63 and otherwise healthy.
Yeah.
Right. The fact that they thought to test her for it is really interesting. Like, that was good detective work.
Yeah.
Another thing out of this case too, people kind of seem confused about Gene Hackman's Alzheimer's diagnosis and how that contributed to his other disease, heart failure. You know, what would you remind people about Alzheimer's? Because it's not just about forgetting things. It takes a toll on the body too.
Yeah, I think we think of it as like forgetting things and things like that, but lots of times Alzheimer's is secondary to kind of like the same things, the inflammation, particularly in blood vessels and things like that, that can lead to other diseases such as heart disease and stroke. Oftentimes heart failure is the consequence of high blood pressure and then these changes in the vasculature that makes the heart, less efficient as a pump. So even though memory seems maybe not so much related to the heart, they actually are pretty tied together.
Interesting. Let's talk about these 2 reports, sobering statistics here about where we're heading obesity-wise, and it's not just our country. This was a pretty expansive studies, right, that looked at 400 countries in the world, and we're all on this trajectory.
Yeah, we're all on this trajectory. Some of us are a little bit harder on it than others, but if you look at 2050, about half of adults, that's a huge number, a third of kids, we're talking billions of people, will be either overweight or obese. The problems with this, I think, at least twofold. 1, quality of life will be lower for those individuals. They'll have higher rates of diabetes, heart disease, things like that. That's not great. 2, healthcare is expensive. Like, how in the world are we going to afford to take care of, all these people who are going to have, heart disease, diabetes, strokes, and things like that? So kind of a daunting task that we're looking forward to as far as, trying to change that trajectory, whether that's, increased physical activity. Certainly there's probably a component of our diets, ultra-processed foods, calorie-dense foods, that are really kind of stacking the deck against us right now.
Do you still use the BMI as that's the standard?
The BMI is still the standard. There are issues with the BMI. There may be better ways to do it, but the nice thing about BMI is it's easy. We can apply it, fairly broadly globally. There are people that are going to have a high BMI that, aren't going to necessarily see the health consequences of being obese. People with a low BMI that might, but in general, it's what we got to work with.
We always need a couple of segments for
a
Dr.
lot more
Pothoff.
time.
Yeah.
Yes, we're barely scratching the surface here, but it's very interesting. Thanks, Dr. Pothoff.